Our guest today is a former football player, track athlete who is now one of Canada's top writers, Morgan Campbell, now a tremendous author. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today was born and raised in Mississauga, provincially ranked track athlete, a standout high school football player, all Ontario. He played U.S. college football at Northwestern University, an award winning journalist for the Toronto Star, CBC Sports, and the New York Times. And now, author of a great new book. Welcome to the program, Morgan Campbell. Great to see you, my friend.
Hey, great to be back with you, Joe. Let me just clarify for your audience, like I'm so much better at journalism than I ever was at track or football. So I just don't
Right.
want I don't want because they're gonna say, "Hey, you played at Northwestern. Where are your stats, guys?" I was a bench warmer, right? And I
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that out of the way um, from
Right.
Jump Street, just so that people
Yeah.
keep their expectations in check. But all those things provincially ranked. I was more of a regional high school track person, but the
Yeah.
older I get,
Okay.
the better I was. You know how it goes.
Exactly, and that's how it always is. Eh? We have selective memories. But I want to say that first of all, let's talk about the book. Great book, My Fighting Family: Borders and Bloodlines and the Battles That Make Us. Loved it. Lots to ingest in here. There's some football and track, as we mentioned, but it's certainly not a typical sports book. I would say maybe a little bit of a love story. I heard you call it a love letter from Black Canada to Black America. What made you write this book? What made you decide that I want to write this book?
There are a few things that came together. One is that I've been playing with some of these ideas in my head, sort of in the background for a long time, for a couple of years before I left the Star. I left the Toronto Star at the end of 2019. Um, and folks would tell me, "You have such an interesting, fascinating sort of family story. It should be out there." And I would take it on, but not really. But the more I started thinking about it, the more I really thought that like our family story is very unique in the sense that we are Black Americans that came to Canada. So in that sense, we are minorities in Canada because we're Black folks in a country where most of the people are white. Amongst the Black people here in the GTA, we're minorities in the sense that we are Americans where most of the other Black folks here are from the Caribbean. Um, and so when you're a minority in that many ways, that's fertile ground, for a lot of conflict, but conflict is what makes stories go. Add to that, layer on the fact that the two sides of my family, my mom's family, my dad's family, have never gotten along. And this rivalry goes back to Chicago in literally the 1930s. Again, that's one more site for a lot of conflict, but conflict is what gives birth to compelling stories. And a lot of it is just, I figured it was time. A lot of times when especially in this sort of media environment, um, where the big outlets, they don't the big outlets have all downsized,
Yeah.
and so a lot of times we as individuals who write, who create, who are journalists, there are a lot of stories that we would like to see, but that are not out there. But it's on us now to create the stories that we feel are missing. And so I felt that stories about my family, but about families like mine, because we aren't the only Black Americans to come to Canada essentially seeking the American dream. I haven't seen a lot of those stories, so that I figured there was room for one. And so, I took a buyout from the Star in 2019, started work on this book in 2020, started earnest work on this book in 2020, and we were off to the races, Joe.
Right. Well, the reason a couple reasons I wanted to read it for sure. I mean, I know you're a fight fan as I am as
Yes.
well, and we've met at the fights before, and and it sounded like a tale covering some real life challenges, and you talked about the conflict, and of course, great stories, conflict, and overcoming adversity is awesome. And then when I read it, it was great, well written, funny. Like Marla's hair was the color of the hair that broke the camel's back was one
Yeah.
line that stuck out for me.
Yeah, man.
And Yeah, and then of course Lisa running, Melanie B running. Bet on Melanie, she gets more practice. Or
Yes.
another word, another word that rhymes with forlornly. Yeah, so
All true.
yeah, yeah. So a lot of good stuff in there. But I want to talk about this crazy fighting family you got. But first of all, Grandpa Jones, Claude, great
Yep.
musician who was he was determined. He was told he couldn't join the reserve officers training corps by a teacher. He back that was backed by the principal, so he took it downtown to the school board in
Yes.
Chicago, but didn't tell his parents. And wow, I mean, he was a guy who was determined. Of course, we're seeing pictures of your mom now, and another determined person, Jeannie. Let's talk about Jeannie,
Yes.
and who apparently had a pretty good right hand, from from what I
Yes.
understand.
My mom, what do you need to know about my mom? Well, what I tell people about this book is that I'm the narrator. In some ways, I'm the
Yeah,
main character, but the star is my mom. And a lot of people that have read the book, they come out of it admiring my mom's strength in the sense that when she was young and she had because she was they were the only black family in this all white neighborhood in Chicago. One thing I'm I don't think Canadians can often appreciate about Chicago, but if you read the book, and I hope many of you do, what you'll appreciate is that is among the most segregated cities in the United States um, right now, and especially back then. So my mom's family was the only black family in this white neighborhood, and she got into it with these bullies. And she's a girl, they were three boys, and she wound up taking the biggest one and knocking him out with a right hand. And she was maybe 12 years old. And my mom, even now, my mom is 5 feet tall. My mom is not big, right? Even now, she's a sweet old lady. I've told people this before, and but she don't take shit. And she will knock you out and go right back to baking cookies. That's my mom. And what
right,
people really admire about my mom after they read the story is that like the strength that she had to stand up for herself in that situation, but also the strength she had in not like knocking out her father or her mother-in-law at different points during the story because they are so meddlesome and so intent on causing trouble and continuing like this interfamily conflict. And there are points in the book where my mom, if you read it, she would be justified in taking both of them and body slamming them, but that wasn't like the mature thing to do, and she was strong enough to show the restraint and try to solve these conflicts in other ways. And so people really come through this book admiring my mom again for the different ways in which she shows strength.
right. And she took the high road, and it was probably a good idea in retrospect, right? And
Right. But how
right.
like when
So
you read the book, you put yourself in her shoes. Like how
yeah,
easy would it have been for anyone not to have taken the high road?
right.
But she also knows when the high road isn't the best road, and sometimes uh you got to punch somebody in the chin just to let them know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
that discretion is hard, to come by. It's hard to learn. It's hard to figure out.
Right, but yeah, clearly that was the right choice because they never bothered her again, and she picked
Right.
the biggest one to knock out too, which is
Yeah.
which is a good idea. Uh, and then your dad, of course, you talk in the book about his scrap with Jamaica Carl, pretty
Yes.
interesting character as well. Could have been much worse in that situation once again if it wasn't for your mom, right? So
Yeah, it's so again, because a lot of what animates the stories in this book is a sense of conflict in the sense that we as Black Americans in Toronto, again, we're minorities within a minority group. And a lot of times, for the most part, we get along with other Black folks, but there were these um, intraracial, intercultural uh, flare-ups. So,
mhm.
my parents, they had these Jamaican neighbors, and at one point, the 2 daughters had gotten into it, and then they got the dads involved. So then my
Uh-huh.
dad, Pete, and then the neighbor, Jamaican Carl, uh, they start fist fighting on the front lawn. And what happens is Carl's wife shows up with a 2 by 4. She gets
Uh-huh.
ready to hit my dad with this 2 by 4. And my mom is 5 feet tall. And my mom just gets in between and she grabs a 2 by 4 and she body checks Carl's wife Carl's wife drops to the floor. My mom has the 2 by 4 now. And again, she takes the high road because she could have gone upside Carl's head with a 2 by 4, but she didn't.
Sure, sure.
She gets rid of the 2 by 4, and then, Carl's wife tells the daughter, "Go get the knife." And the daughter starts to go in and get the knife, and then my mom says to the daughter, "You go get that knife, and you're gonna be the one getting cut." And the girl stops, and she does not
Yeah,
go inside to get the knife. And again, the story is about a lot of things, but again, the thing that comes through is that my mom is really tough and strong, but, like, smart and quick thinking, and really just not the one to mess with.
right. You talk about your dad's journey, his with cancer. Very familiar to what we similar to what we went through with my father. My dad
Mhm.
was a little older when he passed away, but same kind of thing. We saw him deteriorate. I really, I could really relate to it. Very emotional for me, and that journey for you, and it happened to you when you're such a
I
young
was
age, really,
Yeah, I was
right?
17.
17. So tell us about the effect that might have had on you, you know.
Uh,
Yeah.
a couple of things. First, um, for me, back then, I didn't quite know what to expect. Again, and as you guys hopefully, you know, the folks watching and listening to this will pick up the book and read it. But back then, what I knew about colon cancer was that it was survivable, it was beatable because my mom's dad had also had it.
Mhm.
The difference between
Mhm.
the two of them being that, my mom's dad, the second he felt a little bit unwell, he wound up at the doctor and they stopped
Mhm.
it early, whereas my dad wasn't. And a lot of men are like this.
Right.
Ignored this, ignored the symptoms, ignored the signals. Because by the time they operated on my dad, they said that this cancer had been growing for probably 2 years. And it's hard to imagine cancer growing inside you, have like colon cancer growing inside you for 2 years and you not feeling anything. I feel
Right.
like at some point you would feel something, but my dad was just, he had his habits, he had his routines. And like a lot of men, you think you're bulletproof and you don't seek intervention until it becomes a crisis. And the difference with my dad's cancers too is that it had metastasized. The tumor had burst, and some of these particles that attached to his liver, and that's really what did him in. But again, as a 17-year-old, I didn't really understand the implications of that. So I was learning as it happened. And so to watch him for 11 months sort of appear normal, even through the courses of chemotherapy,
Mhm.
and then in that last 2.5 weeks, uh, deteriorate was stunning, and it just happened more quickly than I could make sense of. Um, but the other thing I learned was that longer term, you're not always going to get what you want. You're not always going to get what you wish for. You're not always going to get what you pray for. Uh, but that doesn't mean you stop. That doesn't mean that you can't keep going. It doesn't mean you can't find other ways to be successful, to be happy, to feel well adjusted, because life isn't gonna be perfect. So what I learned too is that, like, things aren't always gonna be perfect, but that's not a reason to stop going and stop trying to make the best uh, for yourself, of yourself. And so, uh, what I looking back, what I really appreciated was the fact that the people around me showed me support, without feeling sorry for me. Um, and that's longer term, that's another lesson I learned is, and well, I have to learn to sort of be more
Mhm.
sympathetic to people, but at the same time, like feeling sorry for somebody, feeling sorry for yourself isn't what's going to get you over the hump onto the next phase of your life, dealing with grief, feeling well adjusted, and moving forward. You need support, but like, too much sympathy. Oh, poor Morgan this, poor Morgan that. If I had wallowed in that for my whole last year of high school, I wouldn't be where I am right now. Like I had people around me that were supportive, but also able to help me keep moving forward.
Right. It almost seems like judgment, doesn't it? Right? When they feel when you think people are feeling sorry for you or they're telling you pour this, pour that, and it's like I don't think I like to be judged in that way, like there's something wrong with me. Right.
Yeah, well, also the problem with sympathy being on the receiving end is that it does feel good. You know, you like
Hmm.
people to feel sorry for you. But it can become like a drug. You get dependent on it. Um, and again, in the long run, it's not productive. This is not to say you got to be productive every minute out of your life. Like you do have to take time to mourn and to grieve. Uh, but if you wait till everything feels perfect to move forward again, you'll be waiting a long time. And if you are just like wallowing in sympathy while you're waiting for everything to feel perfect again, is never going to feel perfect again. And so those were big lessons I had to learn because life was coming at me fast. That was my last year of high school. And I couldn't press pause. I did
Right.
not have time to press pause. So I had to process all
Right.
this stuff on the fly. Um, but those were, big lessons I learned in that little 13, 14 month span.
Right, because you overcome came a lot in that period of time, right? And just, stuck to the agenda, which was, to try to get yourself a football career, and
Yep,
that was the
that too.
agenda, and I think that's kinda what your dad wanted for you too, and so that
Absolutely.
was, yeah, so but you talk about, the family
There I
quality
am.
and strong there you go. You talk about the family qualities that on both sides so prevalent, and that would be stubbornness,
Oh, yes.
and through your dad's illness and then a subsequent death. Again, there's fights going on between the two sides of the family. Tell us a little bit about what was going on for you going through that.
Well, what happened for me, all right, so just to set the scene for your audience, for people who aren't familiar with the book, my mom's dad and my dad's mom. Okay, so my mom's dad was
Yep,
Claude.
yep, yep.
Dad's mom was Mary. They grew up together in Chicago and could not stand each other. And then so naturally, each of their firstborn marries each other. So
Of course,
now they're stuck together as in-laws. And
the Hatfields
so
and McCoys, right?
yeah, and so in this book, I do have to
Yeah,
try to show some empathy for people who are not always empathetic, right? And
right.
so, uh, as much as Claude and as Mary did, to turn family members against each other, to run roughshod over family members, to try to impose their control, their will on my parents, my generation, their other kids. Um, I did have to try to put myself in their shoes and like I
Hmm.
had to picture like people that I could not stand from high school. Now imagine my kid marrying their kid. Now I'm stuck, right?
Yeah,
How would I react? I would like to say I would react better than Claude and Mary did, but maybe I wouldn't, right?
right.
And these are one of the things we have to be on guard for as we age. And so what happens is, the final week or so of my dad's life, uh, my dad's mom and my mom's dad each sort of take that as an opportunity to renew this ongoing rivalry. And the person they keep taking it out on is my mom. And so a lot of things, I don't want to spoil everything.
Right, right.
Um, but that week, like the chapter in the book is called The Homegoing Heist.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm.
because a lot happens. And for members of your audience that aren't familiar with the way Black Americans speak, a homegoing is another word for a funeral. And
Mhm.
so there was a homegoing, my dad's homegoing. There was also a heist, a literal robbery.
Yeah,
And I don't want to spoil it. A lot of it, like you're laughing, like we can laugh about it now. Back then, it was very serious, but also like the situation was so ridiculous, right? That like as
yeah,
you all read that chapter, there are things that will make you laugh and don't feel bad about laughing because objectively it
right.
is funny. Like it's so farcical. Like what can you do? There was a homegoing, there was a heist.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
were
yeah,
2 sets of grandparents who were, like, at the absolute depths of their pettiness and vindictiveness all that same week while our family is trying to mourn and grieve our father.
yeah, yeah,
And so, I don't wanna spoil everything,
yeah,
but
yeah.
again,
No,
it's go ahead.
yeah. I think there's a movie there in it right there in itself. Um,
I hope
you
so, man,
quote
because that'll
yeah,
boost sales and that'll get me
yeah,
an extra couple of, paychecks, some
Yeah.
royalties. Let's
Beautiful.
do it.
Yeah.
Make the movie.
Let's do that if we can for sure. You quote James Baldwin. How much of
Yes.
an influence was James Baldwin on you?
So for me, and again, this is the Great Canadian Sports Show.
Yeah.
A lot of sports fans, obviously, watching, listening. Here we are, two sports journalists. That's how each of us are known. James Baldwin was not a sports writer. Like the extent of James Baldwin's sports knowledge was, he was assigned to cover Floyd Patterson versus Sonny Liston back
Mm.
in 1961. And he was convinced that Floyd Patterson was going to win this fight. And any boxing historians out there know exactly how the two Liston Patterson
Uh-huh.
fights, they did not go well for Floyd Patterson, right? So, but this is James Baldwin's level of sports knowledge, which is to say he was not a sports guy, but he was such an amazing, perceptive, uh, incisive, forward-looking writer. Um, and you sort of like stylistically at the opposite end of the spectrum from Hemingway, right? Hemingway has a lot of short sentences. Baldwin has
Yeah.
these long, sort of serpentine sentences full of like digressions and these different clauses. But he could still pack so much meaning into like a fairly short work that his writing was tailor made for a guy like me when I was 15, 14, turning 15, uh, looking to get into reading as a hobby. And my mom had a copy of The Fire Next Time at the house. So it was
Mhm.
perfect for me because it spoke to what I was interested in, but it wasn't too long, right? So if my first attempt to grapple with reading had been Frederick Douglass's autobiography, things might have turned out differently. I might have got bored. But The
Mhm.
Fire Next Time was just 100 and I think it was 125 pages of absolute heat, which spoke to my
Right.
sensibilities, but also to my attention span. And through reading Baldwin, I was able to understand like who the players were, what the stakes were in terms of who we were, who my family was, and who we were as Black Americans, but also Black Canadians, Black people, and in the broader global stage. And then also just about you know fathers and sons, because James Baldwin wrote a lot about his father, who actually was his stepfather, but the father he grew up with, and how
Mhm.
sometimes they got along and sometimes they didn't. And again, he would judge his father, but he would also have to empathize with his father and think about put himself in his father's shoes. Here's a guy with 9 kids working these menial jobs. He had at some point bigger ambitions for his life, but he got to feed these kids, and he
Mhm.
and the dad is like subject to all these uh, 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 implicit and explicit racial slights on the job, but he has to take it because he can't afford to be unemployed because he got to feed these kids. And so, as you grow up, again, there's people around you, parents, grandparents, they might do things you disagree with. They might do things you hate. Um, and they might be 100% in the wrong, but it's still worth it to put yourself in their shoes and try to empathize and understand where they're coming from. And these are all the things Baldwin did. And again, sort of laying out a path for me as a writer, but just also as a human being without me even realizing it at the time.
Right. Helping you to understand, your history really, and where you
Yes.
came from, what you're all about. So, because in the book you referred to it as soft edge Canadian racism.
Yes.
Donovan Bailey, who we had on the show, calls it racism with a smile. Actually, here's what
Yes.
Donovan had to say when he was on the show a
Yes.
while
Tell me.
back. Let's listen. Let's
I'm
watch
always
this.
going to align myself with people that are qualified to do work. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know any black or brown person or any woman that wants the job of anybody else. What they want to be doing, what they want to do is to be given an opportunity. One, as we talk about
Mhm.
in my career in track and field, you have to be qualified and you have to put the work in. But you also want to do all those things and not be excluded because of what you look like or what your religion is, or what your gender is and or what your color is. You want to make sure that if you do the work, you're at least gonna come in with a shot with to get an interview to actually be seriously looked at for a job. And these are all the simple things that I talk about. Now, I don't think I'm saying something controversial, because to me, that is the basic common sense that we can all have as productive members of society.
So, what do you think of Donovan's comments in relation to soft edge racism?
Yeah. It's funny. Donovan is comfortable saying that now because he is retired. He's got a
Right.
book out, right? But if
Yeah.
Donovan had said that while he was racing, it would have been very controversial, right? And it would have been it would have placed his marketability in jeopardy, right?
Hmm.
Just for saying that we as black folks, no, we don't need uh 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 we don't need um hesitate to use the word handouts, special
Right.
dispensation, whatever. And when
Right.
you talk about like the new buzzword now on the political right in the US and increasingly in Canada is DEI, right?
Okay.
Diversity, equity, inclusion. And when someone invokes that phrase, what they're saying is that whatever black person or woman or other type of non-white person got this job, they didn't deserve it. It was because of DEI, right? When really the whole purpose of DEI is to deepen and broaden a talent pool. And so, what white folks are telling us when we succeed is that you only succeeded because of your color, because someone gave you a break because of your color.
Mm.
But when you look at all these industries that have been all white or all male for so long, what the white men in those industries benefited from was an artificially small, artificially shallow talent pool. So those are folks that got ahead artificially because of the way they looked or where they landed on the gender spectrum. And so what critics of DEI say diversity, equity, and inclusion, or what before they used to call affirmative action, uh, runs counter to merit. What Donovan was making clear there, and what I've made clear many times, is that no, these programs, this way of recruiting ensures merit because you have a broader and a deeper talent pool. And the starting point for
Hmm.
any of us is that we are good enough to do the job. Like the problem wasn't that people who were not good enough to do these various jobs weren't getting the jobs. The problem was lots of people were good enough to do these jobs and were not getting the jobs, weren't even getting their resumes looked at. And so for me, and you know, I discuss it in this book. I haven't read Donovan's book yet, but he might get to it too, in the sense that even though my parents came from a country where race is the fault line upon which it's built, and came to Canada where race is not black white is not the central fault line on which Canada is built. And a lot of Canadians kind of misinterpret that to mean that racism is not a factor here when it absolutely is and always has been. But
Hmm.
they knew they were coming to this country that on paper is less racist than where they came from, but we are still black people in a country where people mostly are white, which means you're going to run up against racism, which means in a lot of senses, if you want to get that job, you do have to be better, not just good enough to get the job, but twice as good as the white person trying to get that job, just because of the way that biases tend to run. So Donovan's not saying anything wrong there. Donovan's 100% right. And again, what Canada always has benefited from historically is that it's the country across the border from the US. So whatever Canada might be going through in terms of racism, the United States is doing it at a bigger scale in a way that's more visible, but so it makes the United States seem worse. So it makes the
Worse.
United
Yeah.
States seem more racist. But the way I put it is that Canada is the pack a day smoker, looking at the neighbor
Yeah.
that smokes 2 packs a day and saying, "Oh, yeah, they're gonna get sick, all that smoking." Well, pack a day's not helping you either, homie.
Yeah, right. Because we're led to believe, because the Underground Railroad led to Canada, and everything else was like, we are somehow the model citizen and perfect, in every way in that regard. And certainly that's not the case, as your story indicates. So, um, the You talked about having to have a gimmick to be successful. I think that comes from James Baldwin as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, right? And, yeah, because I could kinda relate it to that. So for you, your gimmick was football. It was gonna be plan A and B were both football, NFL and
Yeah.
CFL.
Yep.
But you did end up going to Northwestern. Any regrets on not taking the scholarship and going to college that you had to pay for?
Yeah, and so just to get your readers caught up, there's a chapter in the book that deals with how I decided where I was gonna go to university. Uh, I was a really good high school football player. Your viewers can't see this, and the listeners on the podcast can't see this, but I'm also 5'7". Um, and I was fast, now I'm not fast, I'm old, but I was fast. But to be 5'7" and like, getting a football scholarship, going to the NFL or the CFL. Like I'm a good athlete. I'm a very good athlete, or I was a very good athlete, but to be like a Henry Gizmo Williams, right? 5'6",
Uh-huh.
5'7",
5, yeah,
180.
yeah.
He's a
Pinball.
99.
Yeah,
Yeah, these guys are like 99 and a half percentile athletes, whereas I
right,
might be 91. You know what I mean? And
right.
so, but I was determined to go to Northwestern. I loved the school. I loved the campus. They had a journalism program. And so, instead of taking a scholarship offer from Williams College, which was a really selective, it's George Steinbrenner's alma mater, as a matter of fact, uh,
Mm.
really selective small liberal arts college in Massachusetts. I decided to enroll at Northwestern, join the football team as a walk on, take out a bunch of student loans. And so now Joe's asking me if I ever regret it. Sometimes especially in the first few years
Yeah,
after I
uh-huh.
graduated, and I'm just looking at this student loan statement every month and just paying that thing off. I thought to myself, man, I probably should have gone to Williams College, or at least, even stayed here,
Uh,
gone to U of T, and paid a lot less money in tuition. Uh, but in the long run, you, I don't know. I feel like I wound up with the life that I was supposed to live, that I'm supposed to be living. Not to say that everything's perfect now. And there's still things I'm working toward, but my wife, I met her on an airplane randomly,
right.
um, in 2004, and then we just whatever. That was just one random meeting, and then our next meeting was just as random 3 years later, and that was when we stayed in contact. But if I had gone to Williams College, I probably would have pursued something other than journalism. And just so many of these other details, I don't know that life would have put my wife and I, my future wife and I, on the same path those two times, right? So I changed that one detail. So many other things are different. And so it doesn't really make sense for me to wonder what
Right.
would have been different. The only thing that I think of, like in like March and April, was that Williams College had also recruited me for track. And March, April, the outdoor season starts, but like a lot of schools, northern schools, they just fly you to like Florida, someplace warm, to go do these
Yeah, yeah.
early season races. I'm like, man, I could have had 4 trips to Miami, all expenses paid, as a small college sprinter. But like that doesn't outweigh the fact that like the life I have right now, I like, and I'm here today because of all the things that happened leading up to today. So it's not really, I don't really take it upon myself, to regret uh, having gone deep into debt to go to Northwestern. And Northwestern, I had some experiences that you can't replace, man. I went to the Rose Bowl. I went to the Citrus Bowl. I saw, as a
Right.
bench warmer,
Yeah.
as a bench warmer, I saw Keyshawn Johnson and Peyton Manning. Got a front row seat to all of that. And I have friends that are like friends for life. And there can be guys that like I haven't talked to for 10 years, but they call me, they need me for something, I'm there. I call them, I need them for something, they're there. Uh, and so that kind of thing you can't replace, and it's hard to put a price tag on it. And I'm not sure that I would, given the way my life is right now, and I really enjoy it, go back to 18 years old, go to Williams College and take my chances. Now, I'm sure my life would be fine if I went to Williams College. It would just be very different, and I like the life I have now. So I'm not really caught up in,
Yeah.
what the ramifications would have been if I'd made a different choice at 18.
Right. Yeah. That's yeah. When we look back at where we are and we look back at the way things unfolded, it's all worked out. The way it's supposed to. It's pretty good. So anyway, so I'm reading the book and getting towards the end of it, and I'm thinking, okay, so I know you're married, so I'm thinking it might turn out to be Kelly, right? So I'm thinking, okay, it's probably maybe it's Kelly, but your wife happens to be Perdita Fiducian, one of the finest
Yeah.
athletes this country has ever produced, and it
Yeah,
was a
oh, yeah,
nice
I was gonna point
surprise ending.
there you go. I was gonna point to a picture of her she's over my left shoulder
Yeah,
for people
yeah,
that are
yeah, yeah,
watching on YouTube.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
she's actually
We get
also
some photo
behind that poster. If you look
of the book.
closely, yeah, she's out in
Yeah.
front. Yeah, that's right.
Well, we
Exactly.
got some nice shots over here. Yeah, beautiful
Yes.
woman, amazing athlete, and wow. So that was a nice surprise. Getting to the end of the book and finding out that that's your wife, and you guys have a daughter together, and that's amazing. So, uh, tell us a little bit about the meeting Perdita. You mentioned met her on the plane, and it just went from there. No, no, you you
No.
you ran into her. You ran into her before that. You're covering her. Yeah, yeah, way back in the
No, no, no,
day.
no, no, no. So what happened was the first time we met was on a plane. It was on a flight from Chicago to Toronto. I had been in Chicago just visiting family and friends,
Yeah. Okay.
and she was training. She was still living in Champaign, Illinois, and you can't like Champaign. Their airport is like a it's like a Greyhound station with planes. It's very small. And so
Right.
if you want to go anywhere, you got to go from Champaign to a big city and then fly. So she went from Champaign to Chicago to Toronto. And I was walking to my seat on the plane and I saw her and I recognized her. And so I
Mhm.
just said hi. We started chatting. And then like at the baggage claim, we had another conversation. And then that was that. She had a boyfriend, I had a girlfriend, so that was whatever. We just made
Yeah.
small talk. I think I gave her my business card, and then that was it. Just went just went back to my life. Wasn't thinking about it after that. And then about 2.5 years later, okay, so you'll remember some of these names. I was doing a story about Andre Dury, who
Yeah.
had been a dominant running back at York University. Like me, he's from Mississauga, and had blown out his knee. He tore everything there is to tear in his knee, maybe in his second season at York, and had like a year and a half off rehabbing, because this was like an unusually severe knee injury. And so now we get to like March of 2007. He's getting ready for the CFL draft combine. So I go up to York University to do a story about him, and uh, he was late, and so I was just kind of stranded up there for a while. But the fact that he was an hour later than we had planned meant that I was arriving at the track as Perdita was leaving. And she
Uh-huh.
sort of jogged past me, and I did like a U-turn and followed her out into the lobby, and then we started talking again, and this
Yeah.
time we were both single, and then from there we went. But, like, yeah, the first meeting helped set up the second meeting because if we haven't met the first time, I would have just been some guy saying, "Hey, talk to me." Whereas
Yeah.
this way, it was like, "Hey, remember we met on the plane?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, we did meet on the plane." And so that was how it went, and that was how we met.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's what I mean. But I kind of thought it was interesting how you never mentioned that at all until we get to the end of the book, and then it's pretty who is pretty famous person in this country. Um, but yeah, I love the book. It got me thinking about a lot of things in my life. You know, I had my own gimmick, which was the boxing thing, which eventually
Yep.
because I didn't want a 9 to 5 job. I never wanted any kind of job like that. I needed to have something
Yes.
bigger. I was going to be an actor. I was going to be a boxer. I was going to be something. And then the sports writing thing, or the sportscaster thing, kind of came along and it kind
Much
of dropped
safer
on
than
my lap in
boxing.
a funny way. Yeah, yeah,
Much
that's what I
safer
thought
than
too.
boxing.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I had a lot of friends in Edmonton who had done it professionally, and it's a tough way to make a living, no doubt about that. Um,
Yes.
so it also helped me remember, folks that you know that people that I've had these resentments against have redeeming qualities because I saw how you saw that in Grandma Mary, and you saw that in Grandpa Claude, and you saw how, the sacrifices your mother had made, and you saw all that stuff come together, and you don't hold grudges against those people. It's just like it's their life, and until you walked in somebody else's shoes, you really don't know what it's like, do you?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes me different from them is that, you know, both of those 2 will hold a grudge forever and
Yeah,
ever,
right.
right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Till
yeah,
beyond the grave, and
yeah,
I didn't wanna be like that, you know?
right.
And part of it is, again, as I mentioned towards the very end of the book, this process of learning from other people's mistakes before you regret your own mistakes, you know? And now, Granny Mary and Grandpa would not characterize anything they ever did to anybody as a mistake,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
But
I
anyone else
meant to do
can
that. Mhm.
right, but anyone else can look at what they did and say, "You shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. That was not justified." Right? So,
Yeah,
like, objectively, if
yeah,
I'm doing something that objectively is not justified, when I get past my own ego and resentments and personal rivalries or whatever, objectively, is it justified for me to do this? No.
yeah,
Then I can regret having done that. But if someone else has done that already and I see how it turns out, I don't have to go and do the same thing and get the same blowback before I learn. Oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So
right.
yeah, and that was part of, again, part of the challenge, is part of the learning process. And it's part of what we learn from other people in our families and part of what people learn from reading other people's stories. And one of the things I get from people who have read this book is that, hey, Morgan, my family is nothing like your family, because maybe most often they're coming from a completely different place culturally. But my family
Uh,
is exactly like your family in the
yeah,
sense that lots of families have people that will turn tiny perceived slights into, you know,
yeah,
an all out rumble that lasts forever. And
right.
that was when I wrote this story, I knew that my family was unique, but then a lot of these themes are universal and a lot of people would be able to pick up on this. And so when people ask me like, "Oh, are you nervous about putting your family's business out there?" I'm like, one, it's not all the dirty laundry. Two, it's not just a simple airing of grievances. Three, there are not a lot of people, like, if you read this story and can't see reflection of your family in this story, if there's never been a fight in your family, you're either very lucky or your family is very boring. And so I was not worried about people reading this and like judging us as different from other people, because a lot of people have, if not these exact conflicts, similar conflicts. You show me a family where folks haven't fought over a dead person's stuff. And again,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
hey,
yeah.
congratulations if you've been that lucky, but most of us have a different experience.
Sure. Or, political arguments, or there's a lot of things that
Yes,
drive wedges into
exactly.
people. I mean, yeah, for sure. So, okay, so, yeah, I just wanted, yeah, it was a really amazing book, and got me thinking a lot. Um, uh, Once again, the book is called My Fighting Family: Borders and Bloodlines and the Battles That Made Us. Um, Beautiful, wonderful book, and I could totally relate to a lot of it. So I'm one of those people that you're talking about,
And a lot of
and I love it.
a lot of obscure boxing references that I'm sure, because
Yeah,
that you related to. Like, when I mentioned, like, Nigel Benn versus Iran Barkley, most people would be like, "Who the
the
hell are
blade.
these 2?" But you
Yeah,
were like, you probably watched that fight on
yeah,
WKBW.
100%. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
for
I've seen it
people that are
all.
not familiar, go to YouTube, search Iran Barkley versus Nigel Benn. The fight's only 3 minutes long. It's 1 round, but it's the craziest round you'll ever watch.
Yeah, I loved Hearns Hagler was a good couple
Yep.
rounds too. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Well, if you don't have time to watch all 8 minutes of Hearns Hagler, you can watch all 3 minutes of Barkley versus Ben.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it.
Yes.
Um, okay, so before I let you go, I have a question I'd like to ask all of my guests. What's the
Yes.
best advice you've ever received? What's the best advice you've ever received?
Ooh. ever in my entire life?
Yep.
That's a big question. Uh, oh, I'll keep it. The best advice I've received on a personal level, it's pretty recent. Uh,
Hmm.
from our therapist, like my wife and I, we do couples therapy.
Yeah.
Because like, first of all, to people
Awesome.
watching, yeah, don't be too proud to do it. Your marriage ain't got to
Hmm.
be in trouble for you to do it. In anything else, like if you are a pro athlete, doesn't matter how good you are, you have a coach.
Right.
Coach helps optimize what you're doing. Couples therapy, same thing. And our therapist, her name is Latara Tynes. She's from the Bahamas, but she is, here in Toronto now. And she's like, Morgan, you got to make your wife feel special every day. So that was very good advice. So every day I try to do something to make my wife feel special. All the husbands out there, that's now the best
Yeah.
advice you've ever received. And then
Right.
professionally, Royce and James, longtime columnist at the Toronto Star, and he was there and he lived through a lot of upheaval, you know, and he, especially amongst the previous generation at the Star, really took an interest in me and helped me navigate and survive that place. And he would tell me, look, no matter what you do, just work on yourself, work on what you're doing, make yourself as good as possible at your job. Don't get married to any manager
Mm.
because the managers come and go. They're all hired to be fired. And you become one manager's guy. Once someone above that manager decides they're sick of your manager, you guys are both
Right.
out on the street. Or like you can't, it's a union shop. You can't really fire people like that, but you wind up back to square one because you fell out of favor politically through no fault of your own, because just the person who you were married to fell out of favor politically.
Hmm.
So he said, hey, stay out of the politics, make sure uh, that I was going to say, make sure you kick ass on this job, but Royson like would never use the word ass unless he was literally talking about a donkey. Like Royson is very proper,
Yeah. 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 Right.
and he's like, make sure your skills are rock solid. Do what you got to do to make yourself as good as you can. And again, similar to like what your parents tell you, twice as good as the next guy. But like, you don't have to get married to any of these managers because they will come and go. And when their career is over, you still got to make your career. And so those are two very good pieces of advice.
Awesome. Yeah. Focus on the primary marriage and don't get married to anything at work. Perfect. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 Love it.
Exactly. Because
Yeah.
right. Because if I break my leg and land in the hospital, like who's coming to take care of me? Not the middle manager at work, not the senior manager. They'll be at the cottage
No.
while I'm over here with a cast
Right.
on my leg. It's gonna be your actual marriage, your actual partner that comes and helps you out.
Exactly. Yeah. The guy at work doesn't even care. Not a bit. Uh, yeah. Listen, thanks for doing this, Morgan. I really appreciate it. Really enjoyed the book, and it's really been awesome talking to you. Thanks for doing this.
Joe, anytime, hope to see you at the fight soon. Like the fight scene is so resurgent now here in Toronto, man. Like
Yeah.
if I had time to just go out as a civilian, I keep telling myself I'm going to, but one of these days I'm just going to get back out to the fights as a
Right.
civilian, not even as a journalist. But it's resurgent now. I know you're glad for that, and I
Yeah.
appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah. United Promotions doing a great job. Their Pickering Casino, the Great Canadian Casino, which is I wonder if they got their name from the show. But anyway,
Yeah, that's
interesting.
that's the one at Woodbine. That's the
Yeah.
one at
Yeah. Yeah.
Woodbine. Yeah, they're there
Yeah.
this weekend. Pretty big fight, man.
Yeah.
Women's world title
Yeah.
fight, which
Right.
we didn't used to see those, especially not in the
No.
city. This is an exciting new era for boxing in Toronto, and for as much upheaval as there is, sort of at the global level. Like, what's the zone
Right.
doing? What's Matchroom doing? What's PBC doing? Are the Saudis going to take all this, throw their money around, and get all the biggest fights over in Saudi Arabia instead of Las
Right.
Vegas? There's so much uncertainty, but locally, I don't know that the sport has ever been healthier than it is right now.
Right.
Tyler's putting
And
on
you
shows
talk
at
about
United. Lee Baxter's
Yeah,
putting
you
on
talk
shows. They're putting on shows in Hamilton,
yeah,
Niagara
yeah,
Falls.
for sure.
It's
Yeah,
this is
yeah, Lee
a
Baxter,
very
it's great.
exciting time to be into
The
boxing
the
in
3
Toronto
Lions
and
stuff.
yes.
So there's lots and lots of good fights coming up, and you mentioned the women's world title fight, and PWHL setting records for attendance, and then of course the women's NCAA final outdrawing the
Yeah.
men's. Huh?
This
Huh?
is listen, it's
This is
a
good stuff.
very
Yeah,
exciting time for every type of traditionally non-big mainstream sport because the big sports, they're all maxed out in terms of not
yeah,
maxed out, but they're all like beating the bushes to find new ways to grow.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
whereas these other sports, they're just growing. Period.
Great,
It's very exciting.
organic and fun. All right,
Yes.
thanks, Morgan. Appreciate it.
All right,
We'll
Joe.
know
See
more
you
when we
soon.
come back. All right, buddy. Thanks.
Rely on Walton Restoration's 40-plus years of excellence in residential and commercial restoration. Their strong reputation is built on workmanship, professionalism, and outstanding customer service. Trust Walton as your dependable partner in emergencies, serving Durham, Kawartha, and Northumberland regions. Call 905-725-5666 or visit waltonrestoration.com. Experience top-tier workmanship and service. Walton Restoration, the trusted name in property restoration. Join satisfied customers like me. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca.
When you're injured in an accident, you may be entitled to multiple benefits. Entitlement to these benefits are based on your insurance policy. On a basic policy, you will have eligibility for income replacement benefit, non-earner benefit, attendant care, and medical rehabilitation benefits. It is very important to have a detailed discussion with your insurance broker or agent when obtaining a new policy or renewing your existing policy. Call us now for a comprehensive review of your claim and your policy limits. You do not pay us until we settle your case.
Call Nathan today at 416-289-1236 or visit alliedlegal.ca. And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcast, and Pocket Cast, as well as the Spanglish Network, Buzz TV, and Zingo TV Live. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows are on there. Clips, like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Thanks once again to Morgan Campbell for being on the program. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. And let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit SleepyHollowCountryClub.com. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Number 8, the Rose Red city of Petra, Jordan, and a stay in a unique cave hotel. Visiting Petra was like stepping into a different world, a place where ancient architecture and natural beauty come together to create something truly spectacular. As I wandered through the narrow canyons and towering cliffs that surrounded the city, I felt like I was on an adventure in a hidden world, uncovering secrets and marvels at every turn. And the Cave Hotel was a perfect place to stay, like staying in a secret hideaway with cozy rooms carved right into the rock and breathtaking views of the surrounding landscape. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.